So U equals U stands for undetectable equals untransmittable. So when people living with HIV, they have anti-HIV positive, right? And then they have to take the ARV medications, the antiretroviral medications to suppress the HIV virus in their body. And when we get their blood tasted, we will also taste for HIV viral load, which is the quantity of HIV virus in their blood, right? And when they are adhering to that regimen and the viral load becomes undetectable by the test, it means that they cannot transmit HIV to another individual without HIV through sexual activities. There are a lot of factors that contribute to undetectability of HIV viral loads. So when people living with HIV were diagnosed with HIV, it depends as well on their status, whether they have a lot of viral loads in their body or not, which regimen they are taking. But when they are taking these new versions of ARV, typically TLD, they will be able to achieve undetectability within 3 to 6 months after the initiations, but that also depends on their adherence to the ARV regimen as well. Okay, so one person, if they want to know the HIV status and HIV viral load amount, they have to get their blood tasted. So of course, you have to get tested first to know that you are living with HIV. And after you initiated the treatment, after 3 to 6 months of follow-up visits, the doctors will also prescribe another test called HIV viral load or HIV RNA testing to determine whether you are still, have HIV viral load in your body or not. So HIV treatment now is actually very easy. We comes from the era where you have to take a bunch of pills per day, in order to keep your viral load down. And now we progress to the era where only one pill per day can actually help you achieve that. In a lot of countries, we have the regimens called TLD, and that is a one pill regimen that you need to take punctually every day. And for 3 to 6 months after you've been consistently taking these pills, you can actually achieve undetectability, and therefore you will not be able to transmit HIV to your partners or to your children. We do know that U equals U is a scientific fact because of the three main pivotal studies. These studies' names are Partners 1, Partners 2, and Opposites Attract. And Opposites Attract study itself has been conducted here in Bangkok, Thailand. These studies recluded up to 1,800 zero-discordant couples. And when I said zero-discordant couples, I mean that one person is HIV negative and one person is HIV positive. However, those who are living with HIV in this couple, they are all undetectable in terms of viral load. And after years of follow-up visits and blood tests, and after 100,000 condomless sex acts reported in these studies, they find no or zero linkage of HIV transmissions among these couples. So we know for a fact that people who are undetectable cannot transmit HIV to their partners. The populations that were conducted in these studies that I've mentioned before are zero-discordant heterosexual couples, so male to female, and homosexual male zero-discordant couples, so male and male, with emphasis on sexual activities, for example, penile to vaginal sex, and also anal and penile sex. We also apply U equals U concept to some sexual activities that has not been reported about the risk of HIV transmissions. For example, sex that involve neovaginas or sex that involve neophallus for trans men or trans women, where U equals U can also be applied to them. So basically, all genders of all populations who engage in sexual activities, they cannot transmit HIV if they are undetectable. There are a lot of conversations about mother-to-child transmissions, or what we call in medical field vertical transmissions, and U equals U concept as well. There has been a lot of studies that report that women or mothers who are achieved viral load undetectability during the conceptions, during the pregnancy, and at delivery, they cannot transmit HIV to their children. So the vertical transmission of HIV will also be included in the U equals U concept. There are a lot of instances that the U equals U cannot be applied to, for example, blood donations. The second one is injecting drug use, because injecting drug use and sharing needles, they are not, those who engage in these kind of activities, they are not included in the studies that I've mentioned before. So partners 1, partners 2, opposite attracts, they do not cover those who inject drugs as well. So the U equals U concept cannot be applied to them. However, we know for a fact that HIV transmissions requires up to 3 main factors. The first one is quantity, which is the HIV viral load status. The second one is mode of transmissions, which is sexual activities or doing the injections. And the third one is durations. So when you put out or negate the first factor, which is the HIV viral load, the rate of transmissions will definitely be diminished. So we cannot be able to confidently say that there's no or zero risk of transmission in those who inject drugs, but we know for a fact that the risk will be diminished. And that is very important from harm reduction strategies. I think you change a lot of how people were counseled nowadays. If you ask me, I can barely remember what I counseled to our patients before the era of U equals U, because I've talked about U equals U's a lot for people with HIV and without HIV. So it's quite hard for me to remember. But I remember one thing that I noticed the most is that HIV counseling becomes much easier because you take away that kind of detrimental effects of the bad news away from HIV infections. You actually have a goal for providers to talk about. Before that, there's none. We can only say that, taking this treatment will keep you alive and healthy, and that's it. But there's no sense of being who you were to the clients who are living with HIV or just diagnosed as HIV. They view it as something of a limitations rather than a phase that they can go through. So with U equals U, it actually eased the way I talk about these things to our clients and our patients, because we have a goal for them to strive for, and people who has been diagnosed also have a goal to strive for. So it drives the conversation forward. And what I tend to see or observe from giving the consultation is that people who already know about U equals U before coming in to see me, they get over that grief very, very quickly. They know for a fact that this is just the phase that they have to go through, not the limitations to their lives. So the conversations just flows into some other details regarding ARV initiation easily, comparing to previous scenarios where U equals U is not applicable. And of course, that is not happening a lot. I mean, a lot of people do not know U equals U, and you tend to be, as a provider, you tend to be the first one who disclose the information about this to your clients. What I observed is that their first reaction would be surprised. They think that the science is so advanced. They didn't know about this before, that their life can become, that they can actually become who they were before the infections, and that gives them hope. And hope is what we want to see in clients who are diagnosed with chronic conditions such as HIV. So it changed a lot for me as a provider, and it also changed the circumstances for clients as well. So family counseling and partner consultation regarding U equals U is extremely essential for me, because most of the time, those are people who have lots of questions, which is stem from the fact that they care for people in their life who has been diagnosed with HIV. So there will be prompt with a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty that only providers can provide them peace. What I would do before the era of U equals U is to give away the basic knowledge surrounding HIV. So for example, HIV is not easy to transmit. You cannot get it from hugging, you cannot get it from kissing or eating from the same plates. That's are just an impossible to get HIV. However, there's no numbers there. There's just mechanisms of scientific mechanisms, let's say, which sometimes cannot convince those who have a lot of suspect and dread to understand very well. They still harbor some kind of, untrusting feelings about that. But when U equals U comes and there's a lot of scientific data being generated, you have, the numbers for them to cling to. Like there's zero chance for you to get HIV when you have sex. So then there will be zero chance for you to get HIV from taking the same food from the same plate, or 0% for you to get it from kissing your partners. Things like that, that helps them understand more and strengthen the message of how HIV is not something to be afraid of anymore. You actually tremendously changed my client's life, especially those living with HIV. So previously, before U equals U concept has been established, there's nothing for them to strive for. There's no goal for ARV treatment. Of course, a lot of providers advise them that ARV treatment will keep them alive and healthy, but sometimes that is not enough for people to feel like that's the goal that they want to strive for. There's no sense of returning to who they were before the infections, and U equals U actually changed that. It gives the notions of liberations and a sense of you can become who you were again once you start the treatment and achieve this destinations. When U equals U concept comes, it means that they can actually and fully enjoy the intimacy sexually to your partners, and mothers can now deliver their children without the fear that their children will get HIV. So I think it changed a lot of perspective, and it transformed actually the perspective of HIV, and now it becomes something like a mantle of hope and empowerment for people living with HIV. Yeah, I believe U equals U is one of the tools that can eliminate stigma and discrimination against HIV, both internally and structurally. Internally, people living with HIV right now, they suffer from self-doubt, they suffer from guilt, they believe that they have become this kind of flawed individuals and that they can never be who they were before the infections. I think U equals U partially helps with that. After hearing about U equals U, those living with HIV, they tend to have hopes in their eyes, that they can once again be intimate with their partners without the fear of transmitting the infections to their loved ones. Mothers are more willing to have a child to reproduce because they know that they cannot transmit HIV vertically to their children, and that gives them some sense of empowerment that reduce the internalized stigma that they are facing. Moreover, those who are afraid of getting tested because they are afraid of what it means to be living with HIV, U equals U also help with that, because it, as I've told, it removes the detrimental effects of being diagnosed with HIV. So people are more encouraged to go and get tested. And that's also help with the healthcare overall, for people to know their status and get on the treatment as fast as they can. And structurally, U equals U also address a lot of discriminatory policies around the world, and they remove the justifications of those policies. For example, the deportations or criminalizations of those living with HIV in some countries. This concept help address that it is just, it strengthens the message and the advocacy that this kind of policy shouldn't be here anymore, because it's somewhat a human's rights violations. This also helps, this concept also helps address the biases that healthcare providers also harbor. There has been reports all around the world that healthcare providers do not want to draw blood from those living with HIV, or they even deny treatments for them for fear of the HIV transmissions. U equals U strengthen the messages that they don't have to fear anymore. The basic knowledge of HIV already tells them that, but U equals U helps strengthen that, enhancing the advocacy. So in the future, I believe that it will be a tool to actually end the biases in healthcare, in policy making, and also in internalized stigma as a whole.